Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, May 18th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Pennsylvania. Now, we've been talking about Pennsylvania for quite some time now. I made a video 2 days ago talking about this candidate in specific, Doug Mastriano, the now Republican nominee for governor in the state of Pennsylvania this November, now winning that race after last night's election. Now, I talked earlier today about Madison Cawthorn's district and him losing re-election through a primary, but this primary is much more consequential than a one-off House race where the Republicans are more than likely going to win it regardless. This is about the state of Pennsylvania and where the governorship lies in a hotly contested swing state. Because truly speaking, this just shook up the race a lot more difficult for the GOP, painting it in a much more beneficial light for Attorney General Josh Shapiro, the Democratic nominee for governor. So, what happened? Well, in the primary last night, the Republican Party chose Doug Mastriano, the current state senator from, I'm not entirely sure which district here, maybe it will tell me the 33rd district, but that is not really where his recognition or his notoriety really comes from. It comes from the fact that he attended the January 6th insurrection. And I know that might not seem like a make or break type of deal for voters out there, because on the truest sense, we are going to find that those who attended the January 6th insurrection might end up in Congress this November. But beyond that, he has taken some very extreme chances and very extreme, stances, and the Republican Party is quite worried. When Doug Mastriano started rising in the election polls in the Republican primary, there was a last-minute effort to really prevent him from winning. But then that was all pushed to the side by the fact that Donald Trump endorsed Doug Mastriano as we got closer to the primary. I think he got endorsed maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago. And that endorsement was very, very heavy. It allowed Doug Mastriano to ride this wave to victory, what was already a buildup in the primary in terms of support, landing himself now in the nomination spot. The interesting thing about Doug Mastriano at this point in time is that he did not move to the center. And I know that sounds a bit weird. This is a primary that occurred yesterday, but what would you expect of a candidate that won on a platform such as radical as this one? Doug Mastriano went on statewide television in his speech pretty much saying that no CRT on day one, no mask mandates on day one. Those who lost their jobs during the pandemic, who lost them because they wouldn't get vaccinated or wouldn't wear a mask, you are going to get your jobs back. He said that we need to re-register everyone, wipe the voter rolls entirely and make everybody re-register again. These things are viewed as radical. These things are viewed as far right. Mastriano himself even referring to Governor Ron DeSantis, who is already viewed as one of the nation's more conservative governors, as an amateur, saying, "We love you, Ron, but this is where liberty happens." And he said he would make the governors, like Ron DeSantis, who are already viewed as further right-wing governors, as a moderate. He's essentially saying he will be the most conservative governor in Pennsylvania state history. He doesn't believe the election was legitimate back in 2020, believes that those who are a part of it should be, who are a part of this certification of the election are a part of a much bigger plot to deny Donald Trump the White House. Doug Mastriano is the most radical candidate on the ballot during that primary, and he won. So as a result, we are now in a position where this governor's race looks a lot better for the Democratic Party. And it's not just me that's saying that. Immediately following Doug Mastriano's victory, and you might have seen this when I accidentally showed you in the beginning, you might realize that some of these updated dates were yesterday. The two most important ones I would point out are the Cook Political Report and Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball, because both of them changed their ratings last night. When Doug Mastriano was declared the victor of the state of Pennsylvania GOP primary, people knew this would shift the course of the state. This would shift the course of the election in favor of the Democratic Party. These were toss-ups, according to Cook and Larry Sabato. But what had happened was that they became lean Democrat. Looking at the race itself, it should have been very competitive. In fact, it should have leaned towards the GOP. We should not be expecting Democrats to win in a state like Pennsylvania that they only won by 1 point back in 2020 in a red wave year like 2022. However, the complete opposite has occurred. Sorry for the abrupt cut. I don't know what happened. My screen recorder randomly cut out. But my final point there was that once we get more general election data, I am sure these ratings will change further in favor of the Democratic Party. If you also want to see things beyond just these standard prediction markets or these, not prediction markets, that's what I'm going to show you in a moment, these standard sources like the Cook Political Report, Politico, Real Clear Politics, etc., let's take a look at the political betting odds for the governor's race in Pennsylvania. This is the Republican primary numbers. Nope, these are the Republican primary numbers. This is the general election numbers. One thing that you might notice is that a convergence occurred on a very similar time frame. What you are finding is that Doug Mastriano started to take away from Lou Barletta as we got closer to the general election. Looking at the 90-day trend, Lou Barletta actually was above Doug Mastriano for the majority of the time. And then they started to get closer and closer together, and then eventually it skyrocketed in favor of Doug Mastriano's victory. The day before the primary, it was 64 cents for a Mastriano share and 33 cents for a Barletta share. But by the end of it, it is now at 99 cents for obvious reason. The race has been declared as a Doug Mastriano victory, but it is interesting to see that the convergence in the general election and in the primary occurred at the same time. And the reason why there was a convergence in the general election is the same reason why the Sabato Crystal Ball and Cook Political Report changed their ratings last evening. It's because Doug Mastriano, when it became apparent that he was going to win the primary, is going to drag down the Republican Party. He was going to hinder their ability to win. And you can see this very, very clearly. Because for a very significant period of time, the Republican Party had a lead over the Democrats. People were not confident that even though they knew Josh Shapiro would be that Democratic nominee because he ran unopposed and was endorsed by the Pennsylvania Democrats, that he would be able to win. People were more confident in the GOP, and for good reason. Now, I didn't have the state of Pennsylvania as a red state in my prediction. If you take a look, it's about tilt Democrat. If you take a look at some predictions prior, sure, it was around that point. But since March onward, it has been very clear that the Democrats were going to probably luck out in this primary. And when Doug Mastriano began gaining momentum, that's exactly what happened. Now, the political betting markets are completely flipped. It's 65 cents for a Democratic share and 39 cents for a Republican share. Just 3 weeks ago, it was 64 cents for a Republican share and 36 cents for a Democratic share. The point being, we have seen a complete 180, but not because the Democrats had a sudden nomination spur or Josh Shapiro suddenly got more popular, but rather because the Republicans chose someone crazy, at least in the eyes of a standard traditional voter. Because when I call him crazy, it does sound a little negative, and I think it probably should. At the end of the day, I don't appreciate Doug Mastriano going against the validity of an election that I believe was free and fair. You might disagree on that. At the end of the day, it is not a good stance to take, especially in a state that swung from right to left from 2016 to 2020. There are plenty of voters out there that are going to look at Doug Mastriano and say, I might have voted for a generic Republican, but I will not vote for him. And the betting markets tell us this. Larry Sabato tells us this. The Cook Political Report tells us this. There are big things shifting, and there are big names telling us, hey, watch out for Pennsylvania, for the Republican Party, watch out. Democrats are going to do better now. Josh Shapiro in specific is going to do better. And it makes a lot of sense. If you want to take a look at an election that's a bit similar to this one, you can look back at 2018 or even 2014. For instance, when you look at the 2014 election result, you remember 2014 might be a red wave. But Tom Wolf won by 9.9%. He won by 9.9% because he was a strong candidate, but there was an incumbent governor who actually won back in 2010. The reason he lost was because he became unpopular. The GOP nominated the wrong candidate. If you take a look at the Republican primary here, Tom Corbett ran unopposed, but it was clear as things got closer to the general election that he should not have been that nominee. Looking at the polls back in August 2013, before the primary even occurred, it showed that only 70% of voters thought Corbett was doing an excellent or good job, and only 20% thought that he deserved to be reelected. 45% of the vote is a lot better than 20%, but there were very early warning signs saying, hey, the GOP needs someone different. And the same thing happened this time around, because there were polls telling us that should the election come down between Josh Shapiro and Doug Mastriano, that Shapiro would win by 8. In that same poll, they asked voters if there was a generic Republican and a generic Democrat, who would you back? They chose the generic Republican by 3 points. So it's clear the problem is Doug Mastriano, and the benefit for the Democrats is that Josh Shapiro is popular because he just outran Biden back in 2020, outran Hillary Clinton in 2016. And Josh Shapiro now is the most voted for Democrat in Pennsylvania history. Another thing that I would just say as we look through further primaries and look at the state of Pennsylvania, this is coinciding with a poor showing on the Republican side in the regular election. Taking a look at in the Senate election, which I refer to as the regular election because that's just the way I'm looking at it. Because the Senate election definitely is, I would say, for the Democratic Party, more high stakes. They held their primary last night, but guess what happened? It got exceptionally close. Kathy Barnett, who I made a video about talking about how she surged in the last 4 polls, showing her in second place, ended up coming in third. And now it's a hotly contested race between David McCormick and Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz. He's a recognizable name, he's a household name, but he didn't perform that well in last night's primary. David McCormick, on the other hand, did well, outperformed the polls, definitely did better than third, and could come back and win. But right now, he's in second place. The reason why there hasn't been a declared winner is because the margin is this close. Let me show you. Give me a second. I'll scroll down. Right here, you can find that Mehmet Oz is at 31.3% of the vote. David McCormick is at 31.1%. About 1,600 votes separate the two candidates here, when really there should have been a larger lead for either one of them. But it is clear that voters were very split about who they wanted to support. Oz got 31%, McCormick got 31%, Barnett got 25%, and the rest was split amongst the remaining candidates. Donald Trump's endorsement carried Dr. Oz to this 31.3%, and Dave McCormick benefited as the more moderate Republican, being at 31.1%, though he still very much pandered towards Donald Trump and his campaign. At the end of the day, we do not know how this Pennsylvania Republican primary is going to go, and that benefits the Democratic Party. And should the leading contender right now, should Mehmet Oz win this nomination, the Democratic Party will do better in the Senate election than against David McCormick. This will be a victory for Democrats should Oz win the nomination. It's already a victory for Democrats because of how close it is. Yes, a contested primary is nice, but what I mean by that is because the margin is less than 0.5%, it goes into an automatic recount territory. Why does that matter for the Democratic Party? Well, it means up until that automatic recount is finished, which could be potentially a week or more, the Democrats can campaign in the general election. Connor Lamb is endorsing John Fetterman. Joe Biden has already endorsed John Fetterman. John Fetterman is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate, and he is going to be able to campaign for a week or potentially more ahead of the GOP. In addition to that, there are already claims and concerns of election integrity being lost in the Pennsylvania Republican primary. By no one credible, but by members like President Trump, who has set out on Truth Social that Dr. Oz should just declare victory, that he's already in the lead, and why not just declare victory? Well, we have tens of thousands of votes left to count, which means nobody can declare victory yet. David McCormick could still very well come back. Dr. Oz could still very well win the Pennsylvania Republican primary election. Who knows at this point in time? But if the Republicans are busy infighting and continuing this fight and recount and this effort that could overturn the results or not and the waiting game, these are things that actually harm the GOP because it doesn't give them time to campaign. It doesn't give them time to strategize, whereas John Fetterman has that ahead of time. John Fetterman also served as the frontrunner in this race the entire time, which means he already has had months to prepare for the general election. McCormick, Oz, Barnett don't even know if they're going to make it. Barnett probably won't, but given her history of her unwillingness to accept election results, I wouldn't be that surprised. Mail-in votes are going to decide the Republican primary too, which will also be quite ironic given the way that it was handled in years past. It looks like the ballots that have been delivered on Election Day are still yet to be counted, which really could change the way this race looks. David McCormick could win, Oz could win. You don't know who's going to win. That's why this is bad for the GOP. Had they had a clear and consistent frontrunner, they would have done a lot better. Because another thing that this competitive primary tells them is that the GOP is in a bit of disarray. They don't know who they want. They don't know what they want. And that will ultimately aid in the governor's election going blue. It will also aid in the Senate election, this governor election being bad for the GOP, going blue. The Senate election, the governor election are on a good pathway right now, based off of who has won. The Pennsylvania Republican Party really has hindered itself through these nominations and through the endorsements of President Donald Trump. Donald Trump made the right choice back in North Carolina, and Ted Budd won that election. But his choice of Mastriano and Oz are the wrong choices for the state of Pennsylvania and could very well lead the GOP into two major losses that would have been otherwise easily winnable, especially considering where our national environment is right now. But at the end of the day, he made those choices, and the GOP will have to live with those consequences. Elections have consequences. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.